The most widely published book in human history reveals that we are created in the image of God. Throughout our human journey, each encounter is an opportunity to see the shared humanity in ourselves and others. Regardless of one's views on religion, each experience and each story weaves us together towards a common path. A path of transformation, a process of growth and understanding, a recognition that, at our core, we share a common destiny. What does the search for truth really mean in our lives? How can we find a sense of unity in a world so diverse and divided? As we reflect on these questions, we start to uncover a fundamental connection that binds us all beyond our differences. Welcome to Created in the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities, with our host, Wade Franson. Tonight's episode is From Saigon to Promised Land.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Created in the Image of God. I apologize. We're starting a couple of minutes late today, and I can't blame it on technical difficulties. Can't blame it on our guest. Can't blame it on anything but myself. I was simply inspired by this guest's story. We were talking a little bit about that and got into talking about life's changes. I'm personally going through some changes. We've gone through some pretty dramatic changes in our family life here over the past couple of years, actually, but culminating in dramatic changes in recent weeks and an upcoming trip back to my birthplace, Canada. But this show isn't about me. And my guest story was just causing me to reflect on that and share. And now we're ready to go live with tonight's guest. Again, my apologies for starting late tonight. Our guest is David Truong. I'm still getting that name right. A little bit of an unusual pronunciation spelling because it's a language I'm not familiar with. We'll get into that. Our guest tonight was born in Vietnam and forced to flee as a child after the fall of Saigon. David Truong's life traces a modern exodus from war, displacement, and refugee camps to rebuilding in America and discovering a deeper freedom in Christ and in a new country. After escaping by boat and surviving the uncertainty of camp life, they resettled here. His experience was recounted in his memoir, Escape to America, which has been featured on NPR and other media. Very pleased to have this guest in the studio to tell his story tonight. Let's welcome him. Hi, David.
Hi, Wade.
Give us the correct, true pronunciation, and maybe even the Americanized version and the Vietnam version of your last name.
Well, I hope I get it right. It's Truong.
Truong. And is that exactly how it sounds when you're speaking Vietnamese, or?
Yes.
All right.
That's how it is.
Okay, I'm making it more complicated than it is. But your story is a deep one and a fascinating one. So let's just jump right into it, as we always do. Tell us a little bit about your origin story, your young years, and how these events shaped you.
Yeah, sure. First, I just want to say, you start these podcasts off with saying, how were you created? Kind of like what you did today. And I think I really like that, because in any of these talks, I think the hardest part for me is the part where I talk about myself, like right now. But the way you frame it is, how are you created? It helps me remember that.
And you know the Bible verse, right? Fearfully
Right.
and wonderfully made. Fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great way for me to remind myself that I didn't do all of this. God created me and he put things in my life. So I just wanted you to know I appreciate the way you always start off your podcast.
Thank you.
So about me, like you said, I was born in Vietnam during the tail end of the Vietnam War. And for our guests, if you don't mind, I'd just maybe give a 1-minute quick history lesson about the Vietnam War. And I think,
Absolutely.
Most people now, don't maybe know it as well. For much of the 20th century, Vietnam was occupied by the French. And what began as a fight for independence, the Vietnamese fought the French. And what happened after defeating the French was the country was split in two. This is around the 50s after a battle in 1954. And so there's the North, and then there's the South, North Vietnam and South Vietnam. And my family is from the South. We were from Saigon, but my father, and he's from the South. He's from a family of rubber plantation owners. But he had siblings who were older than him that went to fight in the French War, but they stayed in the North and they were in the communist North Vietnam, right? So I bring that up. It's the context of this story, and it's somewhat familiar, I think, to people because it's like the Civil War. It is for Vietnamese. It's a civil war, and so brothers indeed fought against brothers, right? Um, so after the Vietnam War, well, in '72, the U.S. pulled out. And then in 1975 was when the war ended, meaning the fall of Saigon. And when it ended, my father, who is an Air Force officer in the South Vietnamese Air Force, had an opportunity to evacuate with the US and take our family. But he decided not to do that because he had extended family, his mom and other siblings, and the culture is a type that, you really take care of that big family. It's not just your family, it's the bigger family. So anyway, he decided to stay, and right away he knew that was a mistake. So between 1975 and 78, my parents did everything they could, to escape because it was treason against the new government to escape. So you were breaking a law. And so they didn't want you to do that. So you had to escape. And then, after failed attempts, the hardships and the victories that came with that escape, we eventually got to the United States in 1978, Northern Virginia. We resettled there. And then, wait, from there on, my life was pretty ordinary. I grew up in a suburb, went to high school, went to college. And now I still live about ten miles away from where I came over more than 50 years ago. I'm a father of two little boys under 5. Um, we are we go to a church that I helped establish in 2007. And I've done a pretty good job of living, an ordinary life. But then, but then sometimes I look at my life and it's not so ordinary because of the things that I alluded to, right? Just the escape and the memories of that. And I'll just end my intro with this. I see it as a blessing, right? Because I got to see a really hard life that could have been the life that I would live in Vietnam versus the life that I got to live here in the United States. And that shapes my perspective, whether I knew it at the time or more so as an adult. But it shapes my perspective on things like gratitude, like God and his providence and gratefulness. And that's something that I go back to all the time. Um, and when I'm far away from it, I feel that I lose my way a little, right? So after all these years, I sat down, I started writing a memoir, and that's the result is the book that you talked about.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue into our quick little video about that book. And you've given us a really nice overview. There's so much there to unpack how all these things affected you and shaped you, which we'll do right after we show this quick. I often call it a commercial break. It's not really a commercial break. It's um, a video montage about you and your book. Here we go.
When the Vietnam War ended, a handful of Vietnamese were evacuated with the remaining U.S. forces. Many more were left behind. One family now faced a future without freedom, without certainty, and without hope. So they made an impossible choice. Escape to America tells the true story of a family's flight from communist Vietnam and their dangerous journey toward freedom. They crossed open seas as boat people, facing fear, hunger, and the unknown. They survived refugee camps, separation, and countless sacrifices along the way. Yet through every hardship, they carried something stronger than fear: faith, love, and the determination to keep moving forward. This is a story of resilience, gratitude, and the people who helped make a new beginning possible. Escape to America, available now on Amazon.
When we read that final tagline, a story not often told, I just want to highlight one of the things we were talking about in the studio right before the show started, that as you've been going around talking about this book, you've also done so at veteran meetings with Vietnam vets, soldiers who had been fighting in that war on this side. And I kind of want to start there and just tell me a little bit about that experience, because you mentioned, this was new after all these years to engage in a dialogue conversation and meet some of these people.
Yeah, happy to. So when I wrote this, it's for my family, just our story, and for my little boys to know about his grandparents. But what I found, and it was a great unexpected blessing with this, was connecting with the Vietnam veterans. And it happened this way. I saw a video clip about the Vietnam War for something to do with my son's classwork. And somebody in the comments stated, like, we failed at everything, or something to the effect that we didn't achieve any goals, right? So it dawned on me that the Vietnam War, you can never say it's worth it or it's not worth it for the loss of lives, right? But what I just felt was good came out of it. In what way, right? From my perspective, for every Vietnamese, the good came out of it in that because of the Vietnam War, 2 million Vietnamese first escaped and got to America. And that population is now 4 million. Very proud Americans who would have never had an opportunity to live this life. And I connected to the Vietnam vets in this way. Whatever the purpose of that war were to the US or to the Russians, the unintended beneficiaries could arguably be Vietnamese like myself. And we were introduced to principles like democracy, religious freedoms, not through newspapers, but through the vets, the GIs that were there, advisors that touched my father's life. And when my father had a chance to go over here and study, most Vietnamese, and I talked about some of this in the book, have never heard about America. They don't know about New York skyscrapers and all these great things. And really, that was the introduction to what democracy could possibly be. And they were delivered by Vietnam vets. So I was really compelled. I wrote to them and I said, hey, can I come and just talk? And I just share with you is that I don't want, and if they're dying off, I don't want them to leave thinking they fought a war that meant nothing, that they were unsuccessful, that they didn't achieve anything. So that was the message. I just wanted to tell them, that's what they did for us. So that was a great blessing. Hey, wait, I think are you on mute?
Sorry, I was on mute. So that's a great vignette, and I'm glad I asked that question, because as we were talking earlier about this, and you mentioned 72, I was reflecting on the fact that I was in a very zealous sect of Christianity that was very involved in prophetic interpretation. And there were radio shows at the time, very popular, number one in America by our denomination, that talked a lot about prophecy. And the thing I remember is that this was a sign that the pride of her power, which is a phrase from the Bible, I will break the pride of her power, talking about America. And so the narrative was, we've won our last war as a nation. And from here on out, it's all downhill, and various prophetic interpretations. I don't even want to go there except to say that today, my view of America is America, and these are historical facts. America was behind the establishment of the League of Nations. Even though America never joined it, it was 100% an American initiative. That entity ultimately failed, partially because America didn't join it. But then America went on to drive the creation of the United Nations, which is headquartered in that city you just mentioned. And the reason I bring this up is you've just mentioned that there's a population of 4 million people from Vietnam who wouldn't have existed. And this is representative of the diversity in this country. I have been to over 60 countries. I've lived in 7 of them. I speak 5 languages. There is no country like America, not even close. And one of the things of why it's not close is the mass immigration and the diversity of this nation. Representatives from all over the world, enabling America, even though, yes, sometimes because we're so big, because we're so strong. I wasn't even born here. I was born in Canada, but when I was living in Europe, it used to bother me that the loud, obnoxious American, right, in Europe. But at the same time, there is this understanding of diversity that frankly doesn't exist in most other countries in the same way. And you've just brought up an aspect I had never thought of, the 4 million Vietnamese from that war.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I totally agree that America is the most unique in all the virtues that, the rest of the world probably didn't know that it came from the US, right? And yeah, so back to, with the Vietnam vets, again, I just wanted to, I didn't want to change the narrative, right? The Vietnam War has had its narrative, and frankly, it's probably correct, right? I just wanted to add to that
Right.
narrative,
Well, and this was the next point, really. So part of, and I assume you had some independence when writing this memoir. You weren't being published, perhaps, correct me if I'm wrong, but in a big way by a major publishing house with a major launch where they were basically telling you how to write the story. Did you get to write it your own way? Did you get to control the narrative of your own life story?
Yeah, I mean, it just makes for easier writing. It's a fascinating story. I didn't have to make anything up. I didn't have to add anything that somebody wanted me to add. Again, I sat in my desk. I mean, I started this probably 10 years ago, but life got busy. And then with our second on the way, I just thought, if I don't finish this now, it'll be another 5 years after he's a little older to even get started. So it wasn't meant to be a big, published book. I just wrote it, had confidence in the story. And because I'm writing it for our family, I had confidence in its truth. I had no agenda other than to say this is what happened. Of course, there are opinions in how I see it, but yeah, I wasn't constrained to, add this or emphasize that. It was really the writing was this. I've always told the story in my head and how I wanted to tell the story, the arc of it, right? And for me is because it is a total spiritual journey. That's why I see in the prism of, the Exodus. There's a bit of the wandering while we were in the refugee camps, and then coming to this land that is absolutely the promised land. And I discuss that as well. So that's how I wanted to tell the story. Now, the technical details and the story itself, I was just a child. I remember some of those stories, but my oldest brother, who's really the main hero, if you could call that, in the book, Truong, he's in Vietnam, and he and I would talk, and I'd get raw data from him, then I'd write, and but also just over the years, I mean, these stories of what happened, we've shared as a family together. Um, but anyway, I'll say this. One of the things is I just encourage everybody to do this, even if you're just scratching it down, right? Because as much as I've had thought about and put it in, I still left so much on the table, so much on the table. My parents passed away before this finished. And thank goodness my oldest brother has firsthand account. But I did say, if he goes, this beautiful story, a lot of it goes with it. I couldn't
Yeah.
have put that down um, on paper without his help and all my other siblings. And more importantly, I couldn't have had the story without them. They're the ones that did the legwork. I was just the beneficiary of that work.
Well, and just to emphasize what you said, I can attest, yes, because I did the same thing. And it's interesting. I began the process 10 years of writing down my whole story when my daughter was 2, right? And my son hadn't been born yet. But it was the same sort of impetus, not necessarily the maternal instinct. Maybe it's some kind of paternal instinct to get the story of the family down. But the other piece I wanted to mention about this is that in my preface, I used the quote from Socrates that an unexamined life is not worth living. So the process of, to your point, of just getting and scratching it down, what how illuminating was that for you, rather than just getting the story down for others? What kind of processing, what kind of learnings came from having completed it?
Oh, incredible, incredible. Meaning, I'll just start here is as much as I knew that my parents really did an amazing and remarkable thing, it really got me to understand that, how hard it was. And I concluded that we do hard things, or we're capable of doing hard things if it's motivated by love. That's the only way, right? Because I look at the picture of my parents. If you read the story and of what they went through, she was in prison and the hardships that they went through. I look at them and they were just these young, beautiful kids. They weren't used to doing this. It's like you and I, the next day, life's different. We have to do this hard thing. And I was like, wow, they did that. And so that's on them. But to think about, what they had to put their children through, meaning and they had to, part of the plan was we had to pretend to go down to a fishing village, become a fishing family, and then escape when no one's looking, right? So but they had to send their 2 oldest boys to go do that. And not at any time in those 3 years was the family ever at home alone for a dinner, you know um the little video montage, it's nice, I liked it, but we never had like a sit down dinner like that they had. We're just all scattered. It's like the years of living dangerously, and we never knew we'd see each other again. Every time we left somewhere, I mean, we weren't sure if I wasn't sure if I ever see my brother again or my mom again. So writing, what's illuminating was that is just, they're talented people, but overall just ordinary people doing very extraordinary things when you look at your child's life and you're just motivated to do better for them. And that's remarkable. And that hits home. What else? Just sometimes like just not really understanding, like what was in my dad's head. Like, why did he do this? Why did he choose this path? Why did he do something else? And so even Antoine asked my oldest brother, and we're like, why do you think dad did that? And he's like, I have no idea. And I thought he knew
Yeah.
everything about the trip. And so that was a new illuminating. And there's so much more way. I mean, so I highly recommend people sitting down, writing it. You should be humbled by it because you just see how so many people along the way came in. They come into the picture and they leave, and how they enrich your life, right? So one thing that's illuminating to me, and the last one I'll talk on this point, is this. One of the things that I always, thought was really cool about what my parents did was they did it themselves. Like the many people who escaped just as hard, and they did just as valiant of a thing. My parents decided we were going to make this like a family project. because so many others were lost at sea. They gave money to somebody else. They got swindled. They got turned in. My father was the type of dad that was like, there's no way that's happening, you know? And he had that talent, he had that background to be able to do that. And so you kind of took, I would say, a little bit of pride to think like, hey, we did this on our own. But as I'm writing it, Wade, I see there was a mechanic that came in that helped fix the boat. And it's a really neat story about that mechanic. And then there was, a resort manager that when we were stranded on an island took care of us.
Well,
There was an immigration official in Singapore, or was it Malaysia, that took us out for a dinner. There was a smuggling family that came in to our operations that helped out somebody we probably would have never crossed paths with had we not done something like this. And each one of them, oh, and one last thing, and the Prince of Johor. Like
hmm,
there was a prince in Malaysia that came along and helped reunite our family when we were in two different places. And and that's illuminating. I said, no, we didn't do this ourselves at all. We did this with a lot of help.
amazing.
And of course, the most illuminating for me, and the trip for me, is just looking back and how God's hand was in all of this. When we couldn't do this right, when we kept failing, my father went to his father's grave, or Vietnam's a lot of ancestor worship, right? So he asked for permission. Hey, we want to leave, help us. And my mom, she's uh, was raised somewhat Catholic, and so she started taking my brother Stephen and I to church. And so that's really the seeds of my faith. After all so many years, it began there. And it began when we were lost on the ocean for 6, 7 days. That my mom prayed, and that was illuminating for me, as in his hands, and how he put this together for me to be here and to get a chance to live the life that I have now, and more importantly, have God in my life. That's the most important thing for me.
Well, tell me a little bit about that next. The you are a deacon in a church that you helped plant. So faith is obviously very important to you, and you've integrated it into your life. Tell me a little bit about how that grew and developed as you were, coming to America and getting your feet on the ground here.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, so when we got to America, right, we knew that I did, or my mom, or, that God's hand was in this. But then you forget, kind of like the Israelites when they wandered. You got to the promised land. This generation was going to forget. We were becoming like most immigrant family, which is we just want to survive. We want to succeed. We want to achieve. And there's not really room for God when you're paying attention to all those things, right? And you have a good life, right? And the life gets better. And that's like the number one way in which you forget God. So how did I go back to God and grow into where I am now? It's, I had a brother. He was closest to me. Stephen, he and I were the ones that were most church going in my family. So what he came and he wanted to do that American dream for my parents, right? To be a success. But he went to California, became somewhat successful, kind of the first wave of kind of the IT stuff in the early 90s. But long story short, he gave up all that, went to Louisiana, went to a Church of Christ for the first time, and just changed his life. Read the Bible cover to cover, changed his life. And if we write these stories, Wade, he would live, he would become a Christian, and he would convert me. But God writes different narratives. Steve passed away. About a year after he became a Christian, he had liver cancer, completely, you know, like unexpected. He didn't drink liquor, he didn't, smoke or anything like that. Anyway, but when he was given 3 months to live, I went there, picked him up, came home. I was just graduated law school, and those last 3 years, I'm sorry, 3 months, was him witnessing to me Christ. And he didn't tell me I was living a good life or a right life with God. He wasn't telling me that I was going to go to hell. But he showed me a faith in a God that didn't heal his disease. He showed me a faith in God who let his body writhe in pain day and night, right? And I had to, for me was, and he took me to church. And so it had to be something that became my own faith, right? But so in his passing that's the pivot. That's what changed everything, for me. But still, that doesn't mean you go on a glide path. There's still many, many bumpy roads. And
Well, and certainly, his own life was a testimony to that. To your point, it's not the story as we would tell it, and the story could be then told differently about how everybody lost faith in God and blamed God, and obviously Christianity didn't help him, survive the cancer.
yeah,
But Christianity, or his belief, whatever we want to call it, um, helped in other ways for
yeah,
him and for his soul and for his eternal life. And
yeah. And I refer to as that's the last gift my brother gave to me on this earth was my faith, and
well, I want to go back to another point and broaden this out. And the other point is story and narrative, right? When you started writing your story, you wanted to tell the true story, keep the facts right, and tell it the way you perceived it, the way you
right,
realized it, the way you understood it. When we use the word narrative today, I could go look up the dictionary definition and probably should, but the way it's used is often meant to indicate some kind of spin, a story that has been crafted with an agenda, right?
mm,
So your story could have been crafted around the current hot topic of immigration. You
yeah,
follow me?
yeah,
Your story could be co-opted by this ideology or by that ideology around the topic of immigration. But the true story is richer, more complex, more nuanced than
yeah,
any of those narratives we could spin around it. And so was your brother's story.
yeah. No, that's a great point. And it's happened in that way, meaning, after I wrote this, I feel like both sides of that immigration discussion is pulling at it. And I said, that's fine. I mean, and it's easy for me is I just told the facts, right? And this is what happened. And you can take it from, and that's a good way to, for me to think about this story. And I'll just try and answer or comment one last thing, which is the book and the story about how we got to America didn't talk about what I just talked about with Stephen. It didn't talk at all about me and my faith. In fact, I came on the show because I wanted to at least explore that part because when I go to NPR or library, it's not really and I just wanted to be
You're not
respectful.
witnessing for Christ on NPR. What?
Yeah, yeah, and I'm always respectful. But so when I wrote the book, first thing was I actually made a deal with myself that I wasn't going to talk about me. It was not going to be about me. I had to include a couple of things, but it was going to be about my family. It was going to be about
Yeah.
my brothers, the heroes, right? And it wasn't going to be quote unquote a religious book or a Christian book. But even though I talk about it freely, the facts, Christians read it and they understand it from a Christian perspective. And it did this in this way. It's like the story is not mine. The story belongs to my family. And each one of them should have the ability to write their own narrative, right? As to what it means to them. I can't put what it means to me on my family in that. That's, out of respect. What I hope is I can write the
Wonderful.
baseline and they write their own chapters to what this means. And maybe one day I'll write, this about Steve. I won't write about myself. I'll write about Steve, right? So I think that's in its purest and its most reflective of what God did with that story, right? I just lay out what happened and people can take from it the virtues or whatever it is, right? So I hope that kind of answer your question or hits
Oh,
that mark.
totally. I mean, and I'm actually very inspired by it. I'm inspired by, there's this joke about the Buddhist retreat, right, where people are going to meditate and become detached and reach nirvana. And the joke is, it's all fun and games until somebody loses an eye. And you can not realize what's being said if you don't see that in writing. It's not the word EYE, it's the word eye. Somebody loses an eye. And you took the eye out of the story.
Yeah.
You tried to remove yourself. I did the opposite, right? It's my trilogy is all about me. It's the Wade show. Different purpose, but I'm in awe and I admire what you did. It's awesome.
Thank you.
And the other thing I wanted to then bring up is that I just had last week on this show a scholar, Gary Rensburg, who talks about the Bible as literature. I don't know if you caught that episode, but his thesis, and he's an eminent scholar, and he has adequate proof of this to document why he believes this is true from a literary and linguistic critique perspective, that many of the books of the so-called Old Testament were actually edited and redacted under David and Solomon. That all the pieces of the story, from Noah, Moses, the books of Moses, to whatever degree Moses did or didn't write, some of it, he clearly, the story about how Moses died and didn't get into the promised land and that Joshua succeeded him after his death. Obviously, Moses didn't write that because he would have been dead, right? But so somebody did. But all this stuff was woven together into a narrative that supported the national narrative about the history of Israel. But he doesn't use that then to sort of trash it, that this was a fabrication about the history of Israel, because he shows how, look, what people would document the sins of their kings, not as a glorious thing, right?
Yeah.
But as a shameful thing. And even Jacob, where we get the name Israel from, his name means heel catcher, and he was a deceitful young man.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is not how you would document it if you were trying to spin a narrative, right? So I just find it fascinating that you took that approach, because I also tried to use the Bible as a kind of a guide of how would you tell a story when I told my own, right? Warts and all. Don't hide the things. Don't pretty it up. Don't embellish. Right. Whether they did or not embellish, I don't know, but it doesn't seem to me that it was embellished when it's proof when you see all that. David's sin of Bathsheba and then sending her husband to the front lines so that he would be killed. This is not, and he's not doing so because he's a mighty, mighty warrior. It's a shameful thing. Anyway, sorry for going on that tangent. But,
no. I appreciate that. I mean, I enjoyed talking about the Bible, and I get a chance to do it on here. Yeah, I mean, when you open up the Bible and you read it, I agree 100%. There's stuff that's like, whoa, that's in the Bible? You think it's supposed to tell you, and no, that's what happened. He doesn't condone that act. He's just telling this is what happened. And then also, like, there would be like these little details or facts. I'm like, why was that included? And actually that adds more authenticity to it because it happened, So I can't think of an example right now, but it's just,
I'll give you an example. There is literally this story about Abraham buying land when he came to the land, and it talks about the trees and this and that. Well, if you research, This was a legally authorized real estate transaction. Those were the components, and they have this from other evidence from the era. If you had a real estate and you're a lawyer, you're an attorney, so you know there are certain things that have to be in the deed and the covenant, whatever. Those things are in there in the text. They seem like throwaway details, like who cares about the trees and the stone? No, this is what makes it legitimate.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
So, just so much richness in what you've done with this story, with your life. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and this is a real commercial break. It's for another book. I'm going to tee it up, though, in this context. It's about a little book called Facets of One, which says there is one God, and actually takes the Shema of Israel. Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God, the Lord is one. And ask the question, do other religions have something similar? The answer was yes, they do. They all point to there being one God of all things. And anyway, when we come back, we're going to talk about where are you growing next. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more of David Truong on Created in the Image of God.
In a world where religions often talk past each other, what if we just sat down and listened? Facets of One is a simple devotional, bringing together scripture from the world's faiths, centered on one truth: God is one. From the Bible to the Quran, from Krishna to Christ, each voice speaks in turn, without argument, without division. You don't have to agree on everything. Just be willing to pray, to listen, and to come together. If you're longing for something deeper than noise and division, this is a different kind of conversation. Facets of One. Many voices, one God. Will you start a circle?
Welcome back to the Created in the Image of God. We're talking to David Truong, who survived a boat journey from Vietnam to America with his family, rebuilt his life here, wrote a story honoring that family, telling it in such a way that it wasn't about him. The whole family was honored. We've been talking about story narrative, the stories of the Bible. What I'd like to do now is, as we always do on this show, where are you growing next, David? What's on the horizon with all this experience and at this juncture in your life? What are you up to these days, and where are you going?
Okay, great. Well, first, where am I growing? And I'll just speak from the heart. Is where I try to grow is, my faith in God, my worship, that it's genuine, that it pleases God, that I do, the hard things like forgiveness, mercy, thinking about others, like just the everyday grind of being a Christian, and being an example for my family, my children. That's always where I'm growing, or what I want to grow with the most, right? As to other things relating to maybe the work here, or the book, it far exceeded my expectations. I just wanted to write it and just share with my brothers and sisters, and my son. I just feel like a big relief, but like having an opportunity to talk to you. And what I found is that's kind of neat is I enjoy talking to the readers, meeting the readers, because they ask the best questions. They help me think about this reflection much more. And so I'm really grateful for that. But I always think it's kind of ironic, is I didn't grow up reading a lot. I'm not like a book guy. In fact, I never hung out at libraries, but now I spend a lot of my times in libraries about a book, and so I'll continue to do that whenever I'm given an opportunity to. But then one other area that I'm really excited about is, I'm not on social media, but I recently started a Substack, and it's just motivated by pretty simple. I'll just tell you how I came about is through my years and years of being a Christian, I come across this a lot, that people have been hurt, or, just somebody acted in a way that, impeded their faith, or somebody, or a church service. And I understand they're probably right. There's probably a lot of those accounts, but I always said this, I was like, I just wish they met the Christians that were in my life, and here's kind of the paradox, or the rub is, they're always they have it as an ambition to live a quiet life. Their great deeds are hidden from view, but they have eternal impacts, right? And so I realize how blessed I am, is because I can sit down and just start writing off about people of that, what I just described. A man named Rick, who, just, was 11 to God's kingdom, who made others right, and a Vietnam vet that I just met. He was a dust off pilot, and he and I have lived together close to each other for 55 years. I was born in Vietnam when he did his tour of duty. When he came back and I came here, we lived 10 miles away from one another. And finally we met when I did that presentation, and we had lunch. He's coming over, and his life is remarkable, and we never would have known, right? So what I'm getting at is, it's so lovely to write about these, because they will never shine the light on themselves. But I'm not shining the light on themselves so that they get credit. They don't need it. That's not the purpose. I just want other people to know. If I'm blessed with this, I feel bad that somebody didn't run across a Pat, a Rick, my brother. I want to share that with them, right? And my kind of paradox is, I don't want to be like, out front. I like being the quiet, Levin as well. But so that's okay. I'll keep writing. I'll probably get like 20 subscribers, so I'm not gonna have to worry about it.
How will people find this Substack?
It's called
What's
the
it called?
Levin.
The Levin.
Yeah, the Levin.
All right. So I've just posted it. It will go out on all the channels so that they know it. David Truong, Substack, the Levin. Did I get your name right there?
Yeah. Hey, and wait, I think you had a piece in this. When we first talked, you kind of talked about that same exact concept. This is what you're doing.
The hidden leaven, right?
Yeah, the hidden leaven, Matthew, 13:33,
yeah.
right?
But where I want to go with this is, we were talking right before the show, and the reason the show started 3 minutes late was I was talking about this thought, this inspiration, that God constructed everything such that his love flows to where the growth is. And I started to value, I'm not going to try to unpack that right now. I'm just going to say his love flows to where the growth is. But this gets down to attitude. You can call it faith, but it gets down, you can call it an attitude of gratitude. It gets down to attitude, because you mentioned you wish people would have met this kind of Christian or that kind of Christian. There's this old story about, this old geezer who was sitting outside this little town, let's call it Normalville, US, back, 100 years ago, when people would travel in wagons, buggy and wagon. And this family came to his town, and they were all packed up. They were moving from the other town, and they were like, "Hi, how you doing? We're looking for a new place to live, and we're wondering if this town might be the right place." And he says, "Well, what were the people like in the town you just left?" And they said, "Oh, they were horrible. They were nosy. They were obnoxious. They were this, they were that. We couldn't stand them. That's why we're leaving." And his response was, "The people here are like that too. You should move on to the next town." Right? And the point being, your attitude, and it's this simple thing: glass half full, glass half empty. Or there was years ago the movie The Secret, where they try to make it about money and success. It's not that, but God's love flows where the growth is. Where, Jesus said, "My Father works and I work," and work is a kind of worship when it's done in service to others. And Yeah, that hidden leaven, celebrating the good in other people, celebrating the God in other people. Sorry
Yeah.
for that
Yeah.
tangent, but I was
No,
inspired
it's
by,
good.
the way that you're approaching all this.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
So I've shown where they can go read that. Hopefully it will grow. I'm looking forward, to actually following up and looking at this book more closely. I've not read it,
Uh-huh.
full true confession here. Um, but I'm even more intrigued after you talked about it. So
Yeah.
is there anything else you wanted to add, or should we look at a couple of audience comments here?
Sure. Let's look at the audience comments. Yeah, usually this time we take questions or anything like that, whatever works. I mean,
Yeah.
I can talk more about God anytime, or whatever's good for your show.
Well, there's not a ton of comments, which I'm going to take as an indication that people were listening intently
Yeah.
and fascinated. Um, I'll pick one here. First of all, this is just from Facebook. When you were talking about the story, glory be to God for the praise that you got that's coming in from faith, or the journey that you were able to successfully, with God's help, get through that. This one is from yesteryear, the American dream, more or less. How do you feel about that narrative in your story? We talked about immigration, but how do you feel with this sort of meta message, the American dream, which you know we live in a different age than when that was accepted and acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, the American dream is, to me, is, what I've always understood as freedom of religion, freedom, to make choices how you want to live your life. And that's what really my parents sought. Like, I look back and I say, okay, I know they did this for us, but what is it that they really were trying to do for us? And I think it's this, which is they just wanted us to live in a life where we had choices. And that's choices to do, to make decisions. That is America more than anywhere else, right? That it's almost the definition of America.
Yeah.
Um, and I see that they accomplished that because all their children had a choice. We all chose different paths, different things, and one of the things that most people that read the book, well, actually two things. And kind of a compliment is that this is a Netflix series. You should do it. I'm like, they don't hand out pilots or Netflix on each corner. It's like impossible, right? And then the second thing was, um, in writing this, was anyway, they asked for an epilogue. Because where's Tuan? Where's two? Where's all these people?
Yeah.
And I purposely left it out because I didn't want to tie this journey or what my parents did and their success to what we did. So let's say, an epilogue of somebody that's kind of not doing, he's not a doctor or whatever it is, then that shapes like what that's, and I'm like, that's not what it's about, and the epilogue is, it's just gonna, people are just gonna see, oh, they were successful. I think people just want to see that everybody's okay, but that's one of the reasons that I kept that out. Um, because the
Well, it's
American dream,
it's it's also just the fact that people could really relate to the way you explained the characters. They got
yeah.
to know those people and they wanted to know more. What happened to them?
Yeah. So I would say, for me, I am living the American dream. I have a house. I have, just a nice, comfortable life. I have a chance to, go to church. I mean, that's my dream. I wouldn't change my life or trade it with anybody. My brother in Vietnam, my brother in Florida, I think, I'm happy that they get to choose the life that they chose. And I hope that is the American dream, you know. And so
Yep.
one of the things that also is important to me, and maybe we can conclude in this, is, you know, I did find that this book allows me to remind myself how great America is, and to remind others how great America is, especially with 250. you know, because, you know,
Yeah.
at various times, you know, America gets picked apart. This book, without trying to make it, America's the hero. America's the hero through its people. It's the people who helped us when we got here. It's the organizations that were there. We've got, you know, and the people that came over to the islands to get. And so I think one of the things that came through, I hope, in the book is America's still the hero.
Yeah, I remember reading this very substantial work on the Vietnam War called "A Bright Shining Lie." I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah, I've
Um,
heard it.
and It was really fascinating. One of the things that was indicated, this wasn't the whole premise of the book, but it was that America was fighting on the wrong side, right? That in the North, it wasn't a dictatorship. It was a popular uprising, and this was the leader and the type of nation that the people wanted, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Whereas
yeah,
America was the one that was more enforcing its world vision, its worldview on the South. Um, so I don't want to go deep down any rabbit holes right now, but again, your perspective is really fascinating, interesting, and refreshing. Um, to take a step back and think about this great nation, and the world is a challenging place, and the Bible reveals nothing if not the world is a challenging place. I mean, there's
yeah,
the story of Noah, right, when God in that story wipes everybody out and starts over, right? There's
yeah,
many stories of plagues, some where God was involved, some where he just says, I'm taking my hands off, and now look what's happened, right? I've removed my protection, and you're
yeah.
running off the cliff, right? So the world is a complicated, messy place. And yet here, look, here's a story of what one can accomplish.
Yeah, and just on that, Wade, I mean, you shared earlier how you have been to so many other places, right? And I think on other podcasts, you know, you've lived in quite a bit of places, and your perspective that America is unique in some of these really great things. To me, again, it's America, and this may be the most
Yeah, I
political.
left I
Yeah,
left America because I honestly wanted to live somewhere else.
yeah, okay,
The saying, America, love it or leave it. If you don't like it, then go somewhere else. I did that.
yeah,
And it wasn't that I hated America, but I wasn't really proud to be an American either, right? I was born in Canada. The national identity of Canadians are they're not American, right? They want to distance themselves from America. And in Sweden was the humanitarian superpower of the 70s, and I had such a positive experience there. And there were things in America that really I didn't like and kind of disgusted me. So, for example, in Sweden, advertising to children was forbidden. In America, they turn TV into the babysitter, and they pump desire and want and need and crap at the
yeah,
children, right? They rip a hole in the children's heart that you need this stuff or you won't be happy. Something's wrong with you. This is really quite horrendous. And Sweden didn't do that. So I went to Europe. I wanted to be in Europe, and I loved it there. But after 6, 7, 8 years, I'm like, no, this grass is not greener. It's
yeah,
not.
yeah,
And
yeah.
America has all these pros and cons, and so you're absolutely right about that perspective.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. No, that's why I said that. That's kind of, that was refreshing that you said that, because I found that most people that have the biggest gripe about America has never left America. And so I think that's commendable that you did, and you found what it is.
right.
But I think the key is this. And every time I go visit, I went to France, is we're not perfect, and I found lovely things there. They knew time to sit down, talk. It's about quality versus quantity, right?
I
And all of
loved
that
the time
stuff.
that I spent in France. Lived
Yeah,
there briefly and speak French. I loved France.
right. And I think the key is you take what's good, and you build it in your lives, and you leave the not that you agree with, and you come back here, and so isn't that just, that's the best way to do it, instead of like it's mutually exclusive. It's just like
Right.
with people. My father was a really great at certain things and wasn't great at certain thing, and the key to life is learn from the great, somehow leave the bad, right? So whether it's countries, but overall, America was founded, I think, I would say, on Christian principles, right? You look at the all the writings and the founding fathers, and there's something there that it's the greatest country in the world, and the fact that it was founded by Christians says something.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to just do at least one more. I've been kind of wanting to share this with you, just so we get this person's question, because maybe others have it. Out of curiosity, do you ever visit Vietnam anymore? There are areas that are just beautiful.
So I have not been back, right? So I'm still from the old school. They're the enemy, and I'm kind of naive on that. My brother lives there half of the year, the one that actually worked so hard to get out of Vietnam. So I think it's just, I just view the U.S. and it's home. Like I don't have that connection to Vietnam, and maybe that's something I need to work on, and I will. It is where I came from, but I don't think of Vietnam with some pull, and maybe that needs to change. And so it's a tourist place, right? And I'm like, well, there's a lot of other tourist places I want to go before I go to Vietnam, right?
Yeah.
So I think so it's not anything that I'm opposed to going there. I just haven't had the desire to go there, because I'm home here. I miss here. I vacation here. But and really an easy explanation is also I'm not like a great traveler. I stress out, and it's out of my control. So that's probably the easiest answer.
Well, and,
Um,
who
yeah,
who could blame you for those early years? You maybe
yeah,
have some, going to visit with the veterans who, there's the whole post-traumatic stress disorder. There may
yeah.
be that in the mix there too somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I almost made it there where my siblings and I retrace our steps, right? Back to the island, and the last leg was to Vietnam. And I got cold feet and I flew back to the US. And my excuse was, look, the Israelites never went back to Egypt, so I better not go back to Egypt.
Well, there you go. Okay, that's interesting. Thank you so much. No offense intended to either Egypt, modern
Right,
day,
right.
or Vietnam today, but
Yeah.
thank you. Fascinating. Um, there were a number. Once I said we're going to go to comments, suddenly the comments and questions started coming in. But I'll just conclude with this and then give you final words here, because we are out of time, unfortunately. Thank you for being an inspiring example of the American dream and how God uses struggles to strengthen us. One more comment. I'm going to go back and just throw this out there too. In honor of your brother, there was a comment here. And I think this is meant universally too. Christian brothers like that are very rare. Both your brother and, generally speaking, we all have warts. We're all hypocrites. We're all sinners, right? We're all sinners, and
Yeah.
none of us measure up to the standard. Pick up your cross and follow me. None of us are really doing that to the nth degree. But again, the glass half full. And Jesus said in Matthew 7, verse 1, do not judge. Whatever standard of judgment you use, that's what's going to be used against you. I often reflect on how people can be very judgmental of those who claim to try to follow a holy path, right? The minute you declare that I want to walk the straight and narrow, you set yourself up. You're not necessarily
Yeah.
throwing stones at anybody, but many
Yeah.
people feel that stones are being thrown, right?
Yeah.
Because Jesus said the darkness hates the light,
Yeah.
and that you
Yeah.
turn the light on, the darkness flees, and the darkness wants to come back. And so the point is, it's easy to critique somebody who's trying. Everybody
Yeah.
can be a Monday morning quarterback. Jesus says, don't do that, because however you judge others, that's how you will be judged.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're supposed to be encouragers, right? So you just encourage people, even those you don't agree with. And most, a lot of times we sometimes draw the line, oh, but it's righteous judgment. I have to admonish. But how many times does that really come up? Versus you have,
There's a narrative.
yeah,
There's a narrative
what,
for you.
right.
Yeah.
Whereas you just have every day of your life many opportunities to encourage somebody. And so I'd rather spend time and effort on that than maybe going around telling people they're going to hell.
Well, thank you, David. This has been very inspiring. Final words as we close out tonight's show.
Oh no, thank you, Wade. I mean, I really support what you're trying to do here, and I appreciate the platform to talk about this story in the context of what it means the most to me, which is my faith in God, Christianity. So, I just think that these are a blessing, and I have you to thank for that, and enjoyed spending the time with you for this last hour plus.
Well, there just one last time, Substack 11, but I'm also going to put up here the title of your book here at the end, Escape to America, right?
That's right.
And then I have only two things to do left tonight, real quick. First of all, the tagline, which is, you are created in the image of God, and God loves his creation. And then the sneak peek for what's coming up next week. David, I hope that you and I can connect offline, talk about other things we might do with what you're doing with the Substack. I will be sharing on my Substack what I've learned from you tonight, and then I can link to yours and promote that. So we'll connect on that afterwards. If you want to just stick around after the sneak peek. For everybody else, here's what's coming up next week, and we will see you there.
Thank you, everyone.
Next week on Created in the Image of God. Sunday, July 5th at 7 a.m. U.S. Central Time. Host Wade Franson interviews Tremper Longman III, Old Testament scholar, theologian, and author. He reflects on the wisdom, complexity, and enduring relevance of Scripture and how the Bible continues to speak to modern questions and challenges, from ancient texts and theology to a deeper understanding of faith, truth, and faithful living. And then on Tuesday, July 7th at 8 p.m. Central Time, host Wade Franson interviews Jennifer J. Wiseman, astrophysicist, author, and science communicator. She explores the wonder and mystery of the universe and what scientific discovery can teach us about life, purpose, and faith. From distant stars and galaxies to the deeper questions that inspire awe, curiosity, and reflection, join us live this week, Tuesday and Sunday, Created in the Image of God.